to be on the exact same day. So if you're doing it once a week, it needs to be every Saturday. If you're doing it, every 2 weeks, it still needs to be every Saturday. Timing needs to be the same because, if I wake up first thing in the morning and I weigh myself, by the end of the day, I can and have weighed up to 10 pounds more by the end of a day. Now, I also ate a lot of hot wings and, I was drinking quite a bit. It was a football game day, but still keeping in mind, it doesn't take too much, and the bigger you are, the more weight you can obviously typically consume. I shouldn't say it's obvious, but so you've got that aspect. Then we put in the menstrual cycle, and studies have shown that have followed women around. They studied the cycle from cycle to cycle to cycle, and they found that there's about an 11-day window between when menses begins, when bleeding starts. Some will call it day 0, some call it day 1. But leading up to it, about 5 to 6 days on either side. So right before you start and right afterwards, there's a steady incline of like fluid retention. A lot of people think this is due to salt and how the menstrual cycle affects how much salt your body holds on to, as well as water. Those things are all up in the air. But ultimately we know around the menstrual cycle, around menses, day 0 or day 1, however you calculate it, 5 days to 6 days on either side of that, there's going to be fluid retention. But what ends up happening is about 5 or 6 days before a woman starts her period, she will begin to steadily add more or retain more and more water. And then after day 1, I refer to it as day 1, once menses has begun, day 1's usually the worst, and then there's a steady decline of water retention. Now, some women may be watching this and say, well, that's just not how my body works. A few things there. One, that absolutely could be true. When we deal with anything relating to endocrinology and hormones, we absolutely know that not everyone's going to be exactly the same, but we do know that people usually fit into like certain norms. So what we want to keep in mind, though, is there isn't the possibility that yours may be a little bit different, or maybe, the other side is there's so many variables to it, Eric. If you happen to later in the luteal phase, right before your cycle starts, if you start having major cravings and you don't pay attention to the fact that maybe you're eating a few more processed foods that have a lot more salt in them, absolutely, salt intake will have a direct relationship to water retention due to how the cells deal with that. And I'm not going to go into the chemistry or physiology of all of it, but ultimately more salt in, you're going to be thirstier, you're probably going to consume more water, and then your body's going to hold on to it. All of that to be said, the main thing to keep in mind here is, let's go back to that daily weighing yourself. Yeah. If I weigh myself every day, I'm a female and I'm on my menstrual cycle, then day 1, if I start on day 1, say I'm on my period and I weigh myself. All right, well, I weigh 5 pounds more than I normally weigh. Well, day 2, I come in and I weigh 4.5 pounds more than I normally weigh. So I lost half a pound and I hadn't really done anything. That's cool. And then, and this is if all other factors are the same. So then next day, you'll notice that maybe I'm only 4 pounds heavier, and then 3 pounds as we go along. And all of a sudden, I'm super excited. This is cool. I'm getting all these great weight loss results as opposed to fat loss results. And so my weight's dropping. Everything's great. Now, this also, what's cool to keep in mind, this actually coincides with estrogen levels rising, which also causes serotonin to rise, which actually means that while this is happening, you literally are getting chemicals sent to your brain that are making you happier. So it seems really awesome. This has a lot to do when we're dealing with motivation too, Eric. But then you kind of notice a plateau. Day 13, 14 rolls around, ovulation. Now you're on the other side where estrogen levels drop and serotonin levels in turn will drop as well. So now you're trying to diet. You feel like you're not seeing a lot of weight falling off the scales. Then all of a sudden on day 21 you wake up, maybe day 22, depending on how long your cycle is, day 23, you wake up and all of a sudden, well, that's weird. I've been eating exactly the same. I've actually been very strict, but I'm almost half a pound heavier. And then we notice that, well, maybe I'm now the next day I'm a pound heavier. And then all the way up into when menses begins again, full cycle, now I'm, 5 pounds heavier. Well, let's say I did everything right. Let's, be a little bit more fair here and say I'm on a modest weight loss journey. So let's say I look at the scales and I only remember what I saw, 2 or 3 weeks ago. Well, now it looks like I'm actually up 4 pounds. But
Right.
remember, I told you last month I was up 5 pounds, correct?
Yeah.
So if I'm paying attention to the cycle, I really actually within that month probably lost a pound, even though I may be up 4. I was up 5 the week or the month before
Right.
on the day of menses. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
So, and then what will happen is we get into that same mode of now it's going back down again as the days go on, and it kind of takes this shape like this. All right, so let's start on we'll say day 20, or day 23 to make it easy. And so what happens is all of a sudden our body starts retaining water up until day 1 where menses begins, then day 2 happens, and we start seeing this downward effect. And at that time, what's happening too is serotonin levels are going up. We're feeling a little bit better about things while we're dropping weight. And then the next thing you know, they kind of do this again. See? And so what's happening is it's easier to understand why motivation will kind of ebb and flow, especially during the menstrual cycle. Getting to your main point there, I know I went probably a little overboard, but I do want to stress the importance of, tracking the menstrual cycle for females, especially females who are on any form of fitness, goals, because what's going to happen is there is a direct relationship with the symptoms you will experience throughout the menstrual cycle, and how well you do, how motivated you may be.